It's the Lekker Rugby Inside Story series.
Welcome to the Lekker Rugby Pod Inside Story. Talk to renowned rugby journalists every week. And this week again, I've got my friend Jared Wright from Planet Rugby. You all know his name. Here's his face. Now you know what he looks like as well. Welcome, Jared.
How's it, MBA? It's lekker to be here again and have a nice little chat about rugby.
Yeah, everybody knows what you look like. You're a regular guest on 8-9 Combo. You've been in our program as well. I'm just kidding. I wanted to talk to you about the permutations going into the final couple of rounds of the URC, what the top eight is going to look like. Harry and I, sort of on purpose by accident, but had a bit of a boo-boo in our video we published on Sunday. And we accidentally, let's call it that, moved the Sharks down to sixth place. And we had a typical meltdown on X about that. We were taken on. So I was interested to hear what you're going to say, where they're going to end up. But to understand what's going to happen in the future, we have to look at what happened in the past, especially this past weekend. Let's start with the Bulls settling the score in Glasgow. What did you think of that game? What stood out for you?
Well, yeah, I think it was quite I think I described in Planet Rugby afterwards, it was with the Lions, but it applied to the Bulls as well. It was a grown-up performance from the Bulls. It was sharp, it was accurate, and there wasn't really that poor period where the Bulls have had where it's just 10 minutes and the other team like completely takes over. By the time they let that happen, Glasgow weren't going to come back and score that last try to draw it or anything. But the defense from the onset was just fantastic, and I think it was overlooked quite a bit. But Glasgow got nothing from their driving maul, and that everyone speaks about Glasgow's fun attacking style and everything, but their real work is their driving maul, and they got no purchase from that. And I think Andries Becker can take a big credit for that one. But overall, I think it was probably one of the sharper games that we've seen from the Bulls. They were put under a lot of pressure by Glasgow, and they just repelled everything that came at them.
Just put that game into context. What does it mean to win 2 games in a row against the previous champion and the previous champion on their home grounds? What does it mean for the Bulls, their confidence going forward?
I think it's immeasurable. You can say, Glasgow and Munster have a whole lot of injuries, but Jake will quickly tell you how many injuries he's got and big players that they're missing. I mean, probably two of the better Springboks last year, Ulrich Rowe and Kurtley Arendse, are both not playing for the Bulls. So, to win at Thomond Park and to win at Scotstoun are not easy grounds, no matter how fit they are or anything. So, I think it's massive for them. And it was almost like baby quarterfinals, if I can put it like that. It's basically playing a playoff match. Those grounds are difficult grounds to play on. The fans really get behind the home teams, and you've got to put a big effort in. And I think you saw that in their tackle counts. I think it was Marcel and Hanekom in the first 2 games, and then this week it was Grobler and Wessels that posted big numbers. So you have to put a big effort to do it there. You have to make sure that not all the referee decisions are going the home team's way, which can obviously happen nowadays. But I think it's massive. It's the kind of ones that it's almost like a round of 16 or a round of 16 victory, and you now setting the pace for your quarterfinal, semi-final, final run.
Those 2 different pitches. I mean, a completely grass pitch in Munster, and then a completely synthetic 4G pitch in Glasgow. Yes. So it's not just away from home.
Yeah.
Difficult, never mind the weather, also the ground underfoot and everything else. That also means a lot to the Bulls, because they can win away from home now, but they can also win in different pitches. They can win in different weather conditions. Where do you think that, where did that change come from? This year, they're almost better away from home than they are at home.
Yeah, I think one thing there has to be a lot of credit given to the Bulls coaches for is the way they've built depth, because you look at the amounts of changes that were made from the first team sheet that played against Munster and the second team sheet. And they've also been on tour for 4 weeks. So I think there's a lot of props that need to be given for depth. We've seen fly half has been a problem for the Bulls once they lost Huerson, and they sort of got it right with Keegan Johannes eventually. But I think that was one of the only positions where they've really struggled in, and across the board they've been able to one player out, one out, next one up kind of thing. So I think that does play a big part. The scrum obviously has been going well. So yeah, I think that they're starting. It's been like a step-by-step building process for the Bulls, and I think they should be excited for next year. I know that's getting a bit ahead of ourselves that you're looking towards next season, but adding more quality on top of what the squad depth is already looking like, it can be a real danger next season.
Talking about the defense, because you mentioned now several times that defense is what stood out there, and also defending against the maul and everything else. You've got John Teed there now as a coach taking over from Gary Gold. He was a defensive coach in the Currie Cup as well, but then he got the post, to be the URC defensive coach. It took a while for that defensive system to kick in, but it seems like it's working now. What's changed? What made this defense so good? I don't want to call it all of a sudden, but lately.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing to say all of a sudden, because that Edinburgh game, the defense was horrific. That's pretty much where the Bulls lost it is, and a lot of it seemed like just individual errors more than like a system mistake, if that makes sense. So I think there were some harsh words said after that Challenge Cup exit, and I think that's where the switch has been. Every now and then there's a game in a season that can make or break your season. And so obviously the Edinburgh loss broke the Bulls Challenge Cup season, but it sort of spurred their URC season on. That's certainly how it feels.
Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? Was it a blessing in disguise for the Bulls to not continue, advancing in the Challenge Cup? Looking at the URC running into the top 8 final.
Yeah, I think if you ask the Bulls, they'll say no. They would have loved to be vying for 2 trophies. You always want to be vying for 2 trophies if you've got the option. But yeah, maybe it will be a blessing in disguise, because if they got away with that defensive performance and carried on, would we have seen the same Bulls team that we've seen over the last 2 weeks? So yeah, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but yeah, I don't know if we would have seen the same attitude coming out of the Bulls.
The Asterix comics or cartoons, and they have this magic potion. I wonder what Rassie's got in his magic potion pot there, because Ruan Nortje and Jan-Hendrik Wessels, ever since they came back from the Springboks, are completely different players to what they used to be. Talk to me about Jan-Hendrik's game. That guy's played out of his skin, and that try-saving tackle that he did on Consigliere, what's his name? What a fantastic thing was that to see.
Oh, it was incredible. If a flanker made that tackle from where the scrum happened, we would still be hunting on about it. But he was still in the front row. He had to break off from his hooker and everything, and still get back there. He's an insane athlete, and I think it's taken a little bit of time for him to settle in as a professional player. He had all that hype around him when he was in grey and that kind of thing, and I think he jumped between hooker and prop so often that he never really settled, but now he's starting to settle in both positions. And yes, it seems to be a growing trend that these youngsters go into the test setups and then they come back the next season into club rugby, and they just look like a different beast. I don't know if you caught the Chiefs game this weekend, and Wallace Titia made his first game back since injury and that. And he played about 20 minutes, but he was unreal for those 20 minutes. He was the best player on the park for that 20 minutes. And I think the same is true for Jan Hendrik. The same is true for Ruan Nortje. And yeah, I think there's quite a few examples where guys just seem to, you almost realize that's the standard for Test rugby now. Okay. And I'm going to play that standard now when I go back to my club.
Yeah. Well, the one thing about Jan, he definitely bulked up. You can clearly see he's got a bit more muscle, lean muscle, like Harry called it. And he seems to be a better scrummer now, because he gave those 2 tight heads, both tight heads from the Scottish team, the Glasgow Warriors, gave a bit of a hard time, man.
Yes, no, he did. We must remember that Glasgow were without Zander Ferguson, who is their go-to Tarte prop. And they are generally quite a good scrummaging team, but they've been nailed with injuries at the moment. So we do need to take that with a pinch of salt. But you can only deal with what's in front of you, and he monstered through both of the Glasgow Tarteds, and he went for 70 minutes. So yeah, brilliant performance. He was all over it.
Talk to me about Glasgow quickly, because they're the defending champions. They're second on the lock, still second on the lock because of that kick that Willie didn't take. The Bulls are third. Are the wheels coming off a bit of their on their campaign? You know, losing to Leinster 52-0, barely making it against Zebra, and now losing against the Bulls as well. Are they in a bit of a downward spiral?
Yeah, I don't know if maybe it's like a bit of a speed bump, or that they like struggling to. They've just stalled a little bit. I wouldn't write them off completely just yet. I think they've got quite a few players that will come back near the end of their season that will really boost them. Because if you think about it, if you're playing a full strength Leinster team, they could beat anybody by 50 points, barring probably Toulouse. That's probably the only club team that they wouldn't post a 50 point score on. So I would take that result, like just with that little asterisk. They played a good Leinster team that were on fire that day, and they've got a whole host of injuries. So I think that they've hit the stall at the wrong time, because they're probably going to lose that second place to the Bulls, and they'll probably finish third or fourth, depending on how the other results go. But like we saw against the Bulls, the way they were able to score two quick tries like that, and then try push for try to equal the scores. They're a team that doesn't lie down easy, and they can turn things around very, very quickly.
Oh, we'll talk about the permutations a bit later on. Let's talk about the Stormers dismantling Benetton. Let me say Sasha Feinberg and Komazulu dismantling Benetton. Not an Italian test team, better than an Italian test team, because they've got this Argentinian backs, and you know that's a very, very strong team. And to lose so comprehensively after beating the Lions the week before, that's a special performance by the Stormers, once again flourishing towards the end of the season.
Yeah, it's they. I think they had a very tough review for the entire week. If I don't know if you saw the talk from John Dobson right after the match, he was seething.
Yeah.
He was seething. So, yeah, I think there were some honest words in the changing room right after the game. And Dobson's normally like a big smiley coach, and I think that he let them have it that week. And I heard Matthew Pearce saying that the defense coach, his name's escaping me at the minute, but
Norman Laker.
Yes, Norman Laker. He looked like a man possessed, according to Matthew Pearce, as he walked into the stadium. So, yeah, I think the coaches took that performance from last week very, very seriously. They took it to heart against Connacht, and they made sure that the players weren't going to do that again, because it was comprehensive. That one kickoff right off the second half, and they allowed Benetton in. That was a little bit soft, but that was probably the only soft moment in the entire match. They were just ruthless. They talk about 22 entries, and in the first half, it felt like every time the Stormers got into Benetton's half, they scored a try. So, yeah, and it was crazy to see, like, Sasha playing the way he is right now. You just want him. You just want a Springbok test next week, so we can see what he can do with the Springbok back in front of him.
Talk about Sasha and Springbok tests, and like Manie now going to Japan. I think that's a sort of a forced thing because he doesn't really have a place anymore. Or you know, I don't want to see Sasha playing 12 again, Manie at 10. I don't think that's his best position. Sasha's a generational player. Let's call him what it is. And do you think Manie left because he sort of knows the writing's almost on the wall, or do you think he'll come back a better player from Japan because it's only a sabbatical?
From what I understand, it's got nothing. It's got more to do about Manie than like the selection battle or anything like that. it's more of like a mental break for him, a reset, and like getting away from the South African media or just the media in general, where it's a bit more quiet in Japan. Yes, we'll pick up on stuff like Cheslin Kolbe's mistake this past weekend, or Damien Dylander scoring a hat trick or something like that. But he can go there, he can play his rugby, and he doesn't feel like he's in the spotlight all the time. So yeah, I think it is down a little bit to the selection in the sense that he can have a break away from that and come back the following season and really press his claim for the World Cup squad, for the Stormers, and just have that reset where it's also not as demanding week in, week out.
Yeah, the thing is, people forget what a talented player he actually is, Marnie.
Yes.
Yes, he's got problems with a bit of BMT in the sense that he's kicking at goal, but everything else in his game, apart from his defense, which is a little bit wonky sometimes. And I want to do a punt here. Andre and Pretorius and I discuss every Springbok position every Sunday. And we talked about fly-offs this past weekend. We rated Marnie and Sasha and Andre and everybody else. I'm putting a link up on the screen here. Go make sure to watch it. If Marnie can improve his defense, he's a bit light. He's only 78 kilograms, and he can sort out his goal kicking. He's on a level. He's as good as Sasha. He just has those little chinks in the armor, don't you think?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think we've seen chinks in Sasha's armor, not the last 2 weeks, but prior to that, where he got that soft yellow card. And he's also going to have things in his game where the media catches onto it and we harp on about it because, yeah, it's cost the team a point there, it's cost you a point there, or it's cost you a match. So, yeah, I think Sasha's he's producing those games where there's so much good that the bad stuff is sort of hidden. And when it comes down to a 2-point game, everyone starts looking for that bad stuff, even if you did the good stuff. So I don't think Sasha's the finished product just yet, but he is crazy to watch at the moment. And for Marnie, it's getting to that point where you can have a run of games where everyone's not pinpointing those little things.
Yeah, it's a short season. He earns more money, less pressure, like you said, from the media, and everyone can have a bit of a break, and he can get his mind straight. I think that's what he needs, a bit of a mental reset. And then he's going to be the Marnie that we got to know in the beginning. All right, so don't you think Dobbo losing his cool a little bit, let's call it politely, let's call it his cool. Wasn't that what was needed? I mean, we've talked about this ad nauseum. Dobbo is too close to the players. He's too buddy-buddy with them. And when he needs to discipline them, it's difficult. You need to be a little bit more distant. You need to be a coach who can kick the occasional chair around and lose your marbles. Didn't that make the difference this weekend, do you think?
I think it did. And everyone's always praises him, and rightly so, that he's like a Stormers man through and through. And that he's there for the Stormers. And I think he's even admitted he doesn't know if he could coach another club. Like, it's the Stormers, and he could maybe go into the international setup, but it's the Stormers. And I think when he went off the way that he did, speaking to Jean de Villiers on the field right after the match, and to the whole of the Stormers fans and everyone watching on TV, it was... He drew the line in the sand and said this was absolutely unacceptable, and we can pack up the season now if that's how we're going to play. And I think it was very much needed, and it sends a clear message to all the players. And yeah, I'm saying that I'm guessing that he went into the change room and let them have it there and let them have it throughout the week. But maybe that what he did with Jean was enough. That was. That he laid down the law there, and they knew
on television. Live.
Yeah.
No, it's true. That shows you what he really feel. Show me what you really feel. Tell me.
Yeah,
that's true.
Well, I mean, it's almost like a thing out of Rusty's playbook. That it's an honest conversation. There's no hiding. That's we have a one-on-one. Nothing like that. It's out there. It's open. This is not right. This is not good enough for the Stormers. Let's get it right, kind of thing.
Now, one thing we haven't seen happen a lot is the Stormers battling in the scrums. Now, we know why they're having problems at tight. Ted Sarsi did a manful job, but he just got on the wrong side of the ref there.
Yes.
And then Brock Harris came on. So, firstly, the story with Frans Malherbe and Neethling Forshare, are they coming back? Will they be back in time for the playoffs, do you think? I hope so. What's going on with France's form, by the way?
Yeah, I'm not actually sure when their timelines are, but Neethling is his was a
He should be
suspension.
back. Yeah,
He
suspension,
should be
4 games.
He,
Yeah.
he should be back pretty soon. But France is France. I don't worry about too much in the Stormers context. Like once he comes back for the Springboks, he always seems to rediscover that form. Everyone's like, oh no. I think it was last season as well. Everyone was saying, "Oh, France is done. He's done." Like we can see it in the Super Rugby performances, URC performances, and then he comes back into the Springbok setup, and he's the same France that won 2 Rugby World Cups. So yeah, I think he's also like Eben Etzebeth. As you get into the knockout stages or the late parts of the season, then he really starts to pick up and perform well. And then I always talk to Angus Usher about it, and always says that the scrum is always an 8-man effort, and you can't look at a tight head's performances in the scrum. You can't just put it down his whole. If he's scrummaging badly the whole season, then it's a pack issue. But if it's a one-off game every now and then it's a personnel issue. And I think maybe that's there for the Stormers is that the Bulls have a big back five behind their front row, but the Stormers' back five isn't as big as what the Bulls have to offer.
Talking about tight heads, and just quickly, Wilco Louw or Frans Malherbe?
Oh, I'll throw one on the bench. I'll throw Volko on the bench. Yeah, Volko's having. He's been unreal since he's come back from Harlequins, and he was brilliant for the Harlequins there as well. But he's just been unreal for the Bulls, and I was glad to see him get his opportunity with the Springboks last year, and he shone with it as well. Yeah, we in rude health with Thomas du Toit also playing well for Bath,
and he can switch.
And he can switch very, very easily. I also quite like the performance of Hanro Jacobs off the bench for the Sharks this past weekend. Vincent Koch seemed to be carrying a bit of an injury, and he came on, fixed the scrum issues, and did really well around the park. So, yeah, I think we quite nicely set beyond the veterans kind of thing in at tight end.
On the subject of veterans and props, the veteran prop, Brock Harris. I wish any news on his injury. I just hope that his career doesn't end on such a sad note. What are you hearing?
The last I heard from Dobbo, it was it's done. That his season looks to be pretty much over. So yeah,
his career's over.
Yeah, which is his career over. So I don't know. Maybe there's a miracle update or whatever. He's 40 years old and he can play both sides of the scrum at professional level. Who knows? He might be push himself back just for the knockout stages for the Stormers. But yeah, I was glad that he wasn't willing to go off on the golf cart, and he wanted to walk himself off, knowing that it might be the end. But yeah, it's sad when a career ends like that. But when you play until you're 40, you can't have too many complaints.
It was a moving moment when the Sasha went and kissed him on his forehead. I like that sort of goodbye of the old man. I like that. Yeah. Okay, now I've been itching to tease you about your Sharks cap that you're wearing. I mean, now we're getting to the Sharks. Now, what on earth are you doing with Sharks cap on your head there?
Yeah, I said to you before, my hair's standing up in all different directions, and it's the only rugby hat that I had. So I clapped it on, and I'm here on a rugby show, so I have to wear the Sharks hat.
I'll courier you a Bulls cap quickly as soon as I can. I tell you now. Let's get this thing sorted so you have more caps to choose from.
Yeah, no, I might use that one as a firelight or something.
No. You have to put it in a glass case there, man. Come on. What happened to the Sharks? We had a bit of a spat, not a spat, a friendly spat on X the last couple of days. Mary and I discussed what we think is wrong with the Sharks. And we made the mistake of saying they might slip to 6. We know they would, but we were just sort of testing to see if people are watching to the end of the video, and they actually do, and they let us know it. So what happened there? Why can you be 19-0 behind and they end up winning 22-19 with all those Springboks? I know there are so many theories floating around. People are saying it doesn't matter whether we win ugly, we're winning. Last year we were
Yeah.
last and we battled to win the Challenge Cup. We focused on the Challenge Cup. This year we're fourth in the log. You must keep it in mind. Keep perspective. Yes, we are keeping perspective. My question is, with those players in that team, why are they not shooting the lights out? Why are they not where Leinster is, for example? They should be in theory.
No, I agree with you. They should be playing the way Leinster are. They should be as high as the Bulls are as well. I know they're not too far off, but yeah, it was very frustrating to watch that first half, and the difference between the first half and the second half was it was mind blowing to see. It was like the Sharks didn't pitch up at all in the first half, and then second half they decided, oh shit, okay, we're gonna have to actually play to beat Ulster. They're not just gonna lie down and let us walk all over them, kind of thing. I think Jacob Stockdale had a really good game for Ulster, and he was a big influence in putting them in that lead. But I think the Sharks, they sort of it sort of feels like they're trying to like outplay the opposition from the first minute, and their skills are just not there for them to do that. They want to run in 5 tries in the opening 20 minutes and put the scoreboard way beyond there, but they like forcing the issue, forcing an offload, and then when the ball's turned over, it's like a lapse on defense or a missed tackle or whatever, and the opposition go and score. Yeah, because in the second half they started kicking more. They like exited better. It was almost like Plumtree went off with them at half time, and they said, "Okay, cool. This is the way we need to fix things." And he put it nice and simply to them, and all of a sudden it was. Yeah, it wasn't fantastic second half, but it was a much more professional looking second half, and everyone seems to be on the same page. And they didn't seem to be on the same page in the first half.
That's one of the big questions about the Sharks is the coaching staff. Do you think? Well, I'm sorry, Belinda, my friend Belinda Glenn. Do you think Plumtree is the right coach to coach this super talented Springbok laden side, or is he maybe not a strong enough personality? Or what do you think is the answer? Is it the coaching staff or is it the players?
I think there's certainly some sort of change that needs to happen in the coaching staff. I can't pinpoint it to you and say it to you it's Plumtree or or it's Powell or whoever. But I think there does need to be a freshening up there, and I wouldn't say clear up and rehire or anything like that. I think maybe a 1 or 2 personnel changes need to be made there. But yeah, it just doesn't seem to be clicking. There's all the star talent that you need there, but something is not clicking right there. So I think there does have to be a change. The one person that I would say definitely shouldn't go is Joey Malango, the Sharks defense. Ngala, sorry, when it is firing, it's airtight. You can see the system works, and a lot of the time you can always tell when a system is doing well is when an individual error is the reason for the try, and it's not a system problem kind of thing. Very much the same with the Bulls. The try from Glasgow in the first half, there was it wasn't even an individual error or a system error. It was just dumb luck that it came off of Caden Moody and went into the winger's hands kind of thing. And the Sharks are very much the same. It's slipping tackles rather than the system failing to shut out the attack. But yeah, I think there does have to be some sort of shift at the Sharks. There has to be some sort of change. But yeah, I wouldn't do a clear out or anything like that. I think it's maybe in one more new voice or something like that.
Belinda and I did a nice little mental exercise last night, and I said, firstly, imagine we parachute Felix Jones or Tony Brown in as coach. And immediately your mind will tell you, yeah, that'll work. Why is that with those players? Don't you think, or do you disagree?
Yeah, well, Felix Jones, and that's where you must be looking at it. Is Felix Jones and Sonny Brown are both the attack coaches, so then perhaps that's the reasoning, is that the Sharks need a new voice on attack, or somebody
Yeah,
else
but I
to
mean,
lead the
more
attack.
a coach that they used to and they respect him. You know what I'm getting at? Those guys are working with him at the Springboks. Let's say I can put Don Iman in for that matter. Though I don't know how good his English is, but you know where I'm going. Or even Stick for that matter.
Yes,
I'm not talking about the
yeah,
attack coach side of it. I'm talking about the Springbok coach side of it.
okay. Yeah, I don't know. From what I understand, Plumtree has a lot of respect in Durban, from the players and the board and everything. And yes, I know he gets quite a bit of stick because they haven't done incredibly well this season, despite the fact the Sharks are sitting fourth on the log. Their performances haven't been convincing. But I do think he does deserve a little bit more time to settle in, having won the Challenge Cup last year, having finished. They'll probably finish top 4, top 5, and also before he joined the All Black setup, he had the Hurricanes firing at all cylinders, and they also went through a bit of a dip once he left and had to sort things out. So yeah, I don't think I'm not sure Plumtree is the reason, and I do see that on Twitter and everything. Every time there's a Sharks team named, or the Sharks are doing poor in the first half, it's like, oh no, it's like Arsene Wenger at Arsenal. Everyone just wants his game, Arsene out kind of thing. Wenger out.
Same here at the Bulls. It doesn't matter that the Bulls
Yeah.
were in 2 of the 3 finals. They're third on the log, maybe second, probably second.
Yes.
It's never good enough. Fire Jake, fire Jake. I'm so tired of hearing that, I tell you. Now, okay, let's look at that. You talked about they wanted to try and score 5 tries in 20 minutes. Isn't the problem in the game plan, firstly? Or if it isn't the game plan, are the players not sticking to the game plan?
Yeah, that's the big question that the coaching staff have to answer, I suppose. As much you like I say, all I feel is that they're trying to push the letter too much. So maybe the game plan gives them too much freedom, and they have to get reeled back in and said, okay, like let's make it a little bit more simplistic. So maybe it's just finding that middle ground and that smooth sailing kind of thing, where they can really build the innings instead of coming out like a pinch hitter.
All right, let's talk about the Lions quickly. Just quickly, because once again, the most I don't know what the word is. Inconsistent team, let's be kind, that you've ever seen. I mean, what happened between last week and this week? I mean, how can they go from losing to Benetton at home and then just sort of annihilating Connacht? I mean, what's in the water in Joburg?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you saw, but apparently Ruan Venter was pulled from the matchday team because of his outburst with Landsberg. Yeah, during the match, and that spilled over into a team meeting and that kind of thing. So, yeah, obviously tensions were high during the week and that kind of thing, and maybe the players sorted themselves out this time around and didn't need the coach to sort them out, because after losing 5 on the trots, they came out and actually put in a really, really sharp performance. And I was saying to you before, it's really great this weekend to see the young talents really rising up. Like we spoke about Sasha, we didn't mention him, but Paul de Villiers was phenomenal for the Stormers. And for the Sharks, Renzo Julius had a great game off the bench. Hanro Jacobs was excellent. And then for the Lions, Renzo du Plessis gets his first start and puts in a man of the match and scores a try. Ryan Mills, Bronson Mills, the center, was also great. So, yeah, the Stormers, the Lions really, really pitched up, and it was also out of nowhere. I saw Ringo said that he wasn't watching the game this week. He was saving his sanity, and it's the one that he should have watched, because
but you see, if he
was
watched, they would have
good to
lost.
see.
So he must now know he'll never watch another game. It's bad luck.
Yeah. And I do think Henko van Wyk makes a very, very big difference to that Lions team. When he's not playing, it's notable that he's not playing. And when he is, the team just looks very, very Jacques Fourie-esque. Like whenever Jacques was playing, the defense was sorted, the attack looked sharper. He's just a glue player for the Lions, and when he's not playing, they really, really miss him.
Well, again, when Andre and I discussed outside centers and inside centers, Henko was a candidate in both of them, one of the better candidates. The problem with him is his injuries. He's injury prone, and Andre reckons he might be over exercising, whatever the word is, training too hard or training incorrectly, and that's why he gets injured so much. We're not sure. We're just speculating, but I agree with you that he's a talent for the future. Just get to the coaches quickly at the Lions. Inconsistency, you've got some of the talent, maybe not all the depth that you have at the other unions, but still can't lose 5 in a row and then sort of just blow the other team away. Is there a problem with coaching there?
Yeah, well, if you hear things go with Sanele Nhamba spoke out a couple of weeks ago, there seems to be unrest every single season with the Lions, and I think it does come out of a frustration with being unable to retain talented players, and that kind of thing. The club's finances, the Lions aren't as rich as what the Bulls and the Sharks and that are pulling in. So, yeah, if they were to make a change in the coaching, would they be able to go after a Johan Ackermann again? Would he want to come back? That's the other thing. I think they've done very well with what they do have and the constant turnover of players. But I agree with you. There does need to be some sort of consistency in performances rather than. I think that's often what fans overlook is you need to have consistency in performance where you can play well and the other team can just play better and you lose. But next week you play well again and you get the results. But the next 2 weeks you lose, but you're playing well. But that's not always the case with the Lions. It's a roller coaster of we're playing really, really well and then we're playing really poorly.
Right, let's get to the permutations because that's what we're really interested in. Like I said, Harry and I are a bit of a wild one there. Let's talk to each other about what you think the top 8 is going to look like. Do you have it in front of you?
I've got the basic the current log in front of me, and I don't think it's going to change too drastically from what we have right now because there are only 2 rounds left. But I'd predict that Leinster are still going to top the URC, and I think the Bulls will move up above Glasgow, and then I think it could be between the Sharks and Glasgow for 3rd place. Quite easily could go to the Sharks with them playing 2 games in a row at home. But I think Munster will probably still force their way into that top 8 and finish it with Scarlets and Cardiff and the Stormers.
Yeah, so it's Leinster, Bulls, Glasgow, Sharks, or other way around. Stormers, Munster, Cardiff, and Scarlets. So let's keep it the way we are. I think the Glasgow is going to end up above the Sharks with 1 point, though. Not that, and that's I think they're going to lose against Leinster.
Thanks, Billy.
Yeah, well, we will see. The nice thing about that is if the Sharks in 4th and the Stormers in 5th, it's going to be a quarterfinal in Durban between 2 South African teams. So and the Sharks should probably have the upper hand there. What do you think?
Well, you say that, but you said earlier that the Stormers gather pace as it goes into the end of the season, and with Sasha playing the way he's playing, with Damian Willemse playing the way that he's playing, and all of a sudden Paul de Villiers almost playing basically the Deon Fourie. He looks like Deon Fourie when he's charging around the pitch. Stormers look strong again. I mean, they've lost BJ Dixon for the rest of the season, but Marcel Theunissen is phenomenal. He's playing that BJ Dixon role perfectly for the Stormers, and Jovan Roos is doing what he does in the URC, which doesn't make it very much easier. So Yeah, the Sharks will be hoping that once it comes to semi-final time, those or quarter-final time, that Springbok mindset clicks in, and it's knockout rugby, and Ebenezer is playing like Ebenezer, Siya Kolisi is playing like the Siya Kolisi that we know. Same applies to the rest of the back line, and yeah.
You're making a case to be the undersharks, like Johan Jordan calls it. You're trying to play down the expectation. You're above the storm and you can beat them, man.
Well, if it is in Durban, and if you look at the where the injuries have happened for both teams, the Sharks should actually be the favourites for that, depending on if Frans Malherbe is back or not, because then the Sharks, on paper, but that's the problem with the Sharks, is on paper they should have the stronger scrummage impact, and they should have a backline good enough to make the most of it.
All right, then 3rd and 6th will be Glasgow versus Munster in Glasgow. I mean, Glasgow should actually take that one quite easily if they're getting their players back, like you mentioned earlier. Some of those injured players.
Yeah, well, you've also spoken about. You asked if Glasgow have sort of fallen off the cliff, and I think there is sort of a concern that that's happened for Munster as well. That I think that Bulls results hurt them, and for me, one of the most shocking things about Munster at the moment is they cannot win their lineouts.
Yeah,
I think it was a bit better this past weekend, but for about 3 or 4 weeks, their lineouts has just been horrendous. It was against Bordeaux in the Champions Cup. It was worse than like schoolboys stuff, and Bordeaux just picked them off one after the other. And I'm saying that I'd put Munster into the top 8, but that's just because Munster found a way to get there. But if they do get into the quarterfinals, I can't see them getting past Glasgow, even if they didn't get those injuries back, because you can't win a knockout match without a lineout.
I heard that they gave up after the Bulls lost, basically. If they end up in the top 8, they're going to go to Europe again because they're more concerned about Europe than the URC, and they're not going to bother, really. That seems to be the going theme at the moment.
Yeah, I think it can become a bit difficult when you've got a coach in a position that is basically getting he's moving out of the position at the end of the season. So they've announced that everyone knows that he's leaving it, and it's almost like, okay, well, we can pack it up and we can start again next season, instead of saying, okay, let's finish off this project. And there is a big emotional driver for them with Peter O'Mahony and Conor Murray both hanging up their boots at the end of the season, that maybe that just this break with the Champions Cup gives them that time to reset, sort out their lineouts, and get their head straight, and they fire off into the last 2 weekends and shock everybody like Munster can.
Harry called it the worst lineout in the history of lineouts, in the history of all lineouts. It was that bad. So I remember.
I've only seen one worse, and that was I don't know if you remember it, but it was it Samoa or Fiji? It was Samoa, 2007 Rugby World Cup against the Springboks, where Victor Matfield, I think he had saying like 8 lineout steals in that match. He just picked off every single one. It's the only time I can think of a lineout that was worse.
Worse, yeah. But it wasn't because they were so bad. It was because the Springboks were so good, wasn't it? Munster is so bad. There's a difference.
Yeah.
Right. Now, 2nd and 7th, Bulls versus Cardiff. I mean, Cardiff shot the lights out this season. Nobody saw this coming. Now they're a bit of a financial problem there now suddenly, but I mean the Bulls should beat them at Loftus.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. They have got Cardiff have got some real quality players in key positions, but overall, I think the Bulls at Loftus should just be too strong. Yeah, that they also seem to be riding a bit of an emotional wave, Cardiff. Things like the financial troubles and that kind of thing. We saw it with the Melbourne Rebels last season in Super Rugby, where all of a sudden they got into a playoff picture and nobody expected them to. So yeah, I wouldn't write them off completely, but I would give Bulls quite a commanding advantage. The one another big thing that Cardiff have going for them is they have Talupe Faletau in their back row, and any back row that has him in it is basically a world-class back row already. So
No, sure, but we've got Cameron Arnacle. What can you say? No, I agree. They should win it quite comfortably.
yes,
That Cardiff King, the Melbourne, typical dead cat bouncing kind of a thing now. That's sort of what it is. Right, then the Leinster Scarlets, I mean, that's a foregone conclusion. I mean, I've got
yeah,
nothing against the Scarlets, but that should be a walk in the park for Leinster, which means you're going to end up with Lions. Let's say Leinster versus Sharks or Stormers. We're not sure, but let's say Sharks and the Bulls again versus Glasgow again at Loftus in the semi-final. Talk about a nice table being set, a revenge dish to be served cold this time.
yes, yeah. Well, it would be really great for the Bulls to knock them over. That would be one hell of a confidence booster, especially doing it back at Loftus, proving them wrong. But Glasgow have tasted blood there already. They've got their silverware there. So if it does come down to that, they'll fancy their chances. And if it is the Sharks versus Leinster in Dublin, the Sharks will look to what the Bulls did in the first season of the URC, go to Dublin, pick up the win there. But yeah, you would still expect Leinster to get the job done over either the Stormers or the Sharks. The only thing is if they have a bit of a cockiness again, where they take a selectional risk in one of their knockout games, and Leinster stumble with that, because yeah, even now when they have when they send in their second string teams, you've got a world class All Black playing 12, and you've got a world class Springbok in the locks kind of thing, and a world class Tarted, a Frenchman at Tarted.
Yeah, someone. All right, now I'm predicting a Bulls Leinster final in Dublin, and you reckon that Leinster is going to stumble again, so that makes it the Bulls champions this year.
I just have a feeling about it. Like I've got a feeling that Leinster won't win both of the competitions. Okay, but they will win one of them. So it's whether they're going to be able to get past Toulouse in the final of the Investec Champions Cup. I'd imagine it's between. I think it's going to be Toulouse. Toulouse are going to beat Bordeaux in the semi-final, and Leinster will get past Northampton. And then I think once if they get to that, all the focus is going to be back on the Champions Cup, and there will be a little slip up in between in the URC. But yeah, you never know. Jacques there now, and he's had a full pre-season, a full season with them. Maybe that makes a difference.
Yeah, but the Champions Cup final is going to be before the URC final. That's end of May. So they're going to win that. They'd be all cocky that they reckon they're going to just walk the URC and then they're going to fall short. That's what I'm thinking.
I think it's certainly possible. I think it's certainly possible, but like I say, I feel like they won't win both of them. And I think we've run through the playoffs in the URC and everything, and we've been quite forthright in deciding who wins besides the Sharks Stormers one. But I think a lot of the fixtures can go either way.
Yeah,
and we've seen that quite a bit this season. Nobody really expected the Bulls to go back to back on their last two games after the Challenge Cup exits. And I think most people expected the Bulls to beat Edinburgh in the Challenge Cup as well.
True.
And it shows you how much playoff rugby can influence the way you play.
Right. Now, that was a playoff game. You're right. That's a knockout. Yeah, and I know the pressure of playing at Loftus, sort of, if it's now, let's say the Bulls against Glasgow, having lost against Glasgow, there's a bit of a mental thing there. I know it. I've spent a lot of time with the Bulls. There is something there. They have to overcome that hurdle to win it. It's not just a walk-in. It's not going to be a doddle. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be tough, especially with Franco Smith. He knows which buttons to press. He knows to press. He knows how to play against the Bulls, against Jake specifically. Don't you think?
No, I think Franco. He's probably right now. I'd probably say that he's the leading coach in the URC. And it's easy to say that when he's the champion or whatever. But from where he's taken Glasgow and where he took them and brought them to the final, and the route they had to take to the final last season, and the way they've just sort of kept the pace this season. I think he's a smart enough coach to get a win over any of the other coaches in the competition.
All right, I've now taken up more than an hour of your time. Thank you for that. It was so enlightening. I enjoyed it so much. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Oh no, it's always great to come on, and it was nice to chat for a good hour.
Yeah, on rugby. Can you believe it?
Yeah, on rugby.
Right, thanks, man. I'll talk to you soon.
It's the Lekker Rugby Inside Story series.